Music, please. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to Mr. Romeo David and Mrs. Maria Lourdes David. Mr. and Mrs. David is a couple's epitome in terms of partnership, heart-wise or career-wise. The groom admires the perseverance of Mr. David, who encounters hardship in his younger years. God grant him with an equally deserving successful partner, Mrs. Lourdes or Ben David, who is the groom's treated as his second mother. Okay? Once again, Mr. and Mrs. David, a big round of applause. Mr. Glenn Braganza and Mrs. Evangeline Braganza with escort. Mr. Glenn Braganza is the groom's immediate head, a tech-savvy coach in the groom's career. Mr. Glenn Braganza's IT expertise is equally shared with his partner, Mrs. Evangeline Braganza, who works in a reputable IT company as well. Career growth and expertise, this too is the groom's mentor in this growing IT technology trend. Once again, let's give the three of them a big round of applause. Now we have Mr. Ricky Manalo and Mrs. Evelyn Advincula Tayag. Mr. Manalo is the groom's geek mentor as well, an idol indeed for people who are affectionate in IT field. Mr. Manalo is currently the Senior Development Representative for Philippines of Gaming Laboratories International. He is accompanied by her gorgeous wife, Mrs. K. Yabut Manalo, a licensed nurse. And I would like to mention this. We also have Mrs. Evelyn Advincula Tayag. Previously, the groom's close neighborhood ties, but has moved out of the country and is currently residing in Ontario, Canada. She is represented by a small but terrible body of the groom since his college days, Miss Florentina Advincula. Pumasok pa po ba si Mrs. Advincula? Mr. Christopher David and Mrs. Ellen David. The couple is a close uncle and aunt of the groom from the mother's side. Mr. David is currently working in Mongolia and cannot join this event with us today. So we have, and so is Mrs. Ellen David. Groom's busy aunt ever, but nobody gets busy with these her cooking expertise and delicacies, a full-time housewife and a businesswoman in her own field. Palapakan po natin muli. Mr. Cyrilo Wenceslao and Mrs. Antonieta Wenceslao. An ex-neighborhood, but even during the small span of time that they were neighbors, the spirit of sharing and bonding is unforgettable. The groom has common denominator with Mr. Cyrilo, fan of boxing. Mrs. Antonieta, a.k.a. Marian, is a hyperactive businesswoman and mother to her 3 children. Muli po, isang malakpakan. Mr. Manuel Perez and Mrs. Antonia Perez. All the way from Region 5, Bicol Province, Mr. Manuel and Mrs. Antonia Perez are here to support and bless the newlywed. This couple also is a very close uncle and aunt of the bride, mother's side. Sigurado po ako, hindi sila nakaboto. Malayo eh. Okay, so we have Mrs. Anita Pantaleon. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Marciano and Concesa David. Nandiyan po sila. Okay, so mga kaibigan, also part of the principal sponsors which are not here today, a very close uncle and aunt of the bride, currently in Bern, Switzerland. Palakpakan po natin sila at nakikinig po sila ngayon, naka-Skype, Mr. Steven Smuts and Mrs. Annalyn Smuts. Lakasan po natin yung palakpakan para marinig nila. Mr. Walter Kroll and Mrs. Nieves Kroll. Mr. Hans-Peter Whitworth and Mrs. Leonidas Whitworth. Also, a close cousin of the groom, Mr. Henry Rosette, and currently in Macclesfield. Is that a correct pronunciation? Macclesfield, England. Palakpak-practice na lahat. Kung hindi ko po nabanggit lahat, please notify me once again dahil tatawagin ko na po ang secondary sponsors. We have the best man and the maid of honor, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Romeo Carlo David and Miss Michelle Watson. Romeo Carlo is Mel's cousin, childhood friend, a playmate, and forever a buddy. And of course, Michelle is the best buddy since childhood days, from grade school to high school. Their separation took place only after Michelle's family moved out in Laguna, but distance does not stop the friendship until today's event. Muli po atin silang palampakan. The groomsmen and the bridesmaids, we have 3 pairs headed by Ms. Rael Cañete and Ms. Christy Esperanza. Rael is the groom's childhood buddy, neighbor and very close friend. And Christy is a close friend and a body colleague at work of the bride. The second pair, Mr. Jonathan Chris Mendel David and Mrs. Rosalie Briones Castillo. Jonathan Chris is the groom's cousin, co-basketball fan, and Rosalie is a close friend and a certified lending shoulder to cry on of the bride. And our final pair, Mr. Michael Bulatao and Mrs. Geraldine De Veras. Michael, equally good-looking of the groom, his younger brother, and Geraldine, a longtime friend, a high school buddy of Mayan. The candle sponsors, Mr. Christian David and Ms. Nicole Manahan. Is that correct? Nicole M. talaga, no? Christian is the groom's cousin and a freshman at the University of Asia and Pacific. And Nicole is the bride, the groom's close friend, and the groom's cousin Kevin's girlfriend. Take it na pala. An accomplice to the crime when the groom proposes to the bride. Ang tulay. The male sponsors, Mr. Rudolph Marqueda and Miss Marjorie Tabuco. Rudolph, the groom's long friend, a colleague buddy, and work buddy at Infocom, a co-basketball friend, and Marjorie, also called Joy by the bride. This young lady was the bride's very own sister. The court sponsors, Mr. Kevin David and Miss Mary Jane Tabuco. Kevin, the groom's cousin, a licensed nurse and currently hired at St. Luke's Medical City, and Mary Jane, the bride's childhood buddy and a very close cousin of the bride. Mary Jane is fresh from her Singapore work and just arrived to join the couple's celebration. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the senior citizens, I'm just kidding, the ring bearer, the coin bearer, and the Bible bearer, respectively, Little Misters Ken Aljur Gavino, John Larry Tabuco, and Lucian Mark Lopena. Palakpakan po natin silang tatlo. Parang hindi nila alam na sila yun. Ken is the bride's coolest nephew, John Labyrinth is the bride's handsome nephew, and Lucian Mark is the bride's former neighbor. The bride has watched over his kid grew when they were neighbors. Palakpakan po natin sila. And now, our girls, little princesses, Eliza Joy Buladao, Angeline Shane Benaventura, and Princess Kirsten Tabucol. Eliza Joy is of the groom, a DOST scholar, and is currently a freshman. Angeline Shane, a brilliant daughter of Knowles High School buddy, Mrs. Darling Benaventura. Shane is currently at grade school with distinct honors. And Princess Kirsten is a bridesmaid. Dear Spring the Princess is currently a top student on her class. Palakpakan muli sila. Pasensya na po kayo, magkailangan ko lang bumwelo dahil sa dalawang pares na aking tatawagin, pinakamalakas na palakpakan ang aking hinihiling. Ladies and gentlemen, the parents of the groom, Mr. Melesio Bulatao and Mrs. Teodora Bulatao. And now, the parents of the bride, Mr. Diosdado Tabuco and Mrs. Melly Tabuco. Ito na po ang ating pinakahihintay. The reason why tayo po ay pumalya sa pagboto ngayon, pero huwag natin silang sisihin. Tayo pong lahat ay magsitayong lahat. Lalo na po yung batang nakatapa. Patayuin po natin. Marami po ang sahig. Ladies and gentlemen, now they are here. Let us all welcome with cheers, glee, and all happiness the new Mr. and Mrs. Bulatao, Mel and Mary Ann. Let's all shout, mabuhay! Mabuhay ang bawang kasal! Hip hip! Hip hip! Hip hip! Okay, Global M, please proceed to the cake for the cake and wine ceremonies. And ladies and gentlemen, you may sit down for a while.